Hey, let's go to Buckles. I hear he's got this tiny bat that flies up your urethra. It's crazy. It feels crazy.
After so many years as a live-action show, don't you think Power Rangers can stand to explore a different medium? An animated Power Rangers show. Does anyone want it? What's the big deal about doing it animated? And how would they do it? Would it do well? Lots of big things to consider, and I think I've got a pretty good argument for it. So let's take a look at why I think Power Rangers is overdue for an animated show. So throughout the history of the franchise, there's been at least 2 attempts to make it animated. To quickly touch upon the attempts, there was a project called Power Rangers Origins. It was done by Zagtoon, the same studio in charge of Miraculous Ladybug, in collaboration with Saban Brands. The project was in development around 2014, making a sneaky cameo in some concept art during that year's licensing expo. Eventually, the project was cancelled, and a concept movie leaked the following year. Fun fact, the high-quality version of the concept is apparently lost. No one bothered to archive it. Oops. But prior to this, the big rumor in the fandom was that Disney wanted to start their own animated Power Rangers. 2 pieces of media exist that have fueled these rumors. First is a piece of art from an artist named Brandon Ragnar who did an animated redesign. According to his portfolio, the client was Disney Television Animation. And you may recognize Disney Television Animation as the same studio behind Kim Possible, American Dragon Jake Long, Phineas and Ferb, and more of your childhood. It would have been nice to see their take on Power Rangers, as this was right before the surge of well-written animated shows like Adventure Time, Steven Universe, and Gravity Falls, which was done by Disney. The second was another concept movie, this time done by Nerdcore Entertainment. In my opinion, the designs look very similar, although it's unknown if Ragnar's art is related to Nerdcore's work. Well, there's for sure some studio interest, but is there an audience for this in the first place, and will they accept it? I think the best answer is a little more complicated than a simple yes or no.
Daddy, no!
Daddy, yes!
Back when the show was running, and especially during the Disney era, there was some anti-animated Power Rangers sentiment within the fans.
How would Power Rangers animated series start?
It shouldn't. Ever.
Never, never, ever, ever, for never, ever?
By not airing.
Agreed.
I second that.
By airing agony and pain.
I'm not sure fight scenes could be anywhere near as great in cartoons as they can be in live action. You'd have to have Disney animators for like every episode to be able to really capture the kinetic nature of the fight scenes in Power Rangers.
Actually, with animation, you could do anything. If anything, animation is the only place where something like that could happen.
As if Power Rangers could get any worse.
Power Rangers the Animated Series and the 2009 Power Rangers is fine. Just the Power Rangers the Animated Series? We might have a problem or 2.
But they won't be real people. The series would effectively be over.
But I am telling you right now, that motherfucker back there is not real.
I just don't see an animated Power Rangers replacing the live-action show. Maybe a supplementary show, but as long as Japan is making Sentai, it's too easy to make the live-action show.
That one didn't age quite so well.
I don't want animated Rangers.
Power Rangers animated sucks, but I can see Disney doing something like this. Power Rangers is the only live-action show on Jetix. Maybe not for long.
That last part's hilariously accurate.
Power Rangers' whole charm is the whole live-action factor. Without it, it's just another cartoon. I probably won't even watch it, unless it's tied heavily into the past seasons.
No! Why?
It shouldn't. It would immediately lose its appeal. The part of the appeal of Power Rangers is that it's live action, because it's much easier to suspend disbelief as far as the story goes and enjoy the fight scenes. If it were animated, it would just be another cartoon. It would have to be in the same level as Voltron or G-Force.
Special thanks to all the members of my Discord server who provided these voices. There's an invite link to join the server in the description. As a production, Power Rangers is unique in its style of live-action special effects. Not many shows, especially children's shows, were doing this kind of thing. Spectacles and stunts that would normally be too high budget for a show of its caliber.
Ginger, no!
Which of course was thanks to being able to splice Japanese footage in from Super Sentai, essentially cutting the budget in half. I think a lot of people didn't want to see Power Rangers go away in favor of replacing it with an animated show. Other animated children's media was a dime a dozen, but there wasn't much else like Power Rangers at the time. Add to this Disney's constant threats of canceling the show outright. Tensions were kind of high during this era. While an animated series didn't necessarily spell the end of the show, there was some comfort in knowing Power Rangers would continue, so long as they could cheaply directly adapt Sentai seasons. Look where that got us. With Cosmic Fury being the bookend to the live-action run, we don't have much else other than the comics. There's no one or the other threat looming over us anymore. This means we can have an animated series without it substituting the show we know and love. There's nothing to lose at this point because we've already lost is all I'm saying. It's important to understand that in 2024, especially after the show's ended, an animated Power Rangers show isn't here to replace the live-action show. And I'd say now, more than ever, fans are ready to see where an animated adaptation can take us. But with nothing on the horizon, there's no reason why we can't try something new. But what is the big draw of animation? What can it do for Power Rangers? This is mostly aimed at anyone who maybe doesn't know too much about animation as an art form, or is maybe skeptical of seeing Power Rangers in this way. I'm personally a big fan of animation and would love to do more content related to it on my channel. Hint hint wink wink. But since the beginning of animated media, it's always been hard to get general audiences to really appreciate and respect it. I'm referring to things like recognition, the Oscars repeatedly treating Best Animated Feature as a category for children.
I didn't see them. But I have a toddler, so I just watched Encanto 190 times.
But animation is not just a children's genre. I've kind of avoided using the term cartoon. It's not like I see it as, in any form, being disparaging or negative, but I'd rather avoid any possible reductive connotations as the medium is still looked down upon. Quote-unquote cartoon, as unproblematic a word in my opinion, might give people the wrong idea, and when my goal is trying to be persuasive, the last thing I want is for someone to think I want Power Rangers to go full Peppa Pig. Especially in the time between when Disney owned the show to now, we've had plenty of animated works that have shown that it's not just for kids. They can have a wider appeal, and at least in the superhero genre, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse have been critically acclaimed. You can make it appealing for older fans as well. Animation allows for possibilities that the show hasn't been able to achieve during the show's live-action run. More creative cinematography, limited only by the imagination of the board artists. Think impossible visuals and stunts. For years, the show's had to rely on expensive special effects, so it's rare to get things like the Shadow of the Colossus fight from the Dino Fury finale. While animation is by no means free or cheap, it's more of a possibility and in some ways more economical to do in that medium. Another thing is that animation isn't as limiting as live action in the writing department. We have had so many actors go through the show's run, some are aging, which happens, that's part of life. Others are unfortunately no longer with us. Team-ups have always been a big event for fans. Getting to see their favorite past Rangers return is such a treat. It's fun getting to continue their stories, but it's tough bringing everyone back. Not only is it costly, but you can't do as much as they're typically restrained to just a few episodes for them to guest star in. For example, we've seen Wes return to the show twice in the last decade, and we know nothing new about him, where he is in life, how he's handled leading the Silver Guardians, his relationship with his father, and how Biolabs is doing.
You've more than lived up to the legacy we've left for you. We're all very proud of you.
We do get one tidbit about his team, but not much in terms of substance. In an animated series, you can bring back all of these actors, and not only that, you aren't stuck doing stories following them after their season ends. You can tell any story you want, even ones that they would have been too old for had they done it today in live action. Let's have a Dino Thunder story set while the Rangers are still in high school, or maybe do a whole prequel story set in the lush jungles of Miranoi. You can bring back as many actors because voice acting is much more accessible nowadays. No need to fly them out to New Zealand when they can record remotely at a studio close to home. The possibilities for animation theoretically are endless. So long as there's enough budget, you could do anything. With live action, props and costumes have a cost. That's why in many team-ups on the Power Rangers side, they don't typically bring back Zord suits. Power of Pink is the only episode where this happened. At least in American footage. Even the 30th anniversary special, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Once and Always, opted to use CG then bring back a suit that we know Hasbro has access to via Toei. We can bring back props and sets that are now long gone, re-explore parts of the universe that haven't been touched in years. We can mix and match Megazord parts, take stories from the comics that would have been an expensive endeavor for live action. It's much more achievable in an animated medium. In fact, you can watch the live reading of excerpts from Shattered Grid. It's from Power Morphicon 2018, and it's reminiscent of an animatic. Give it a go if you've got some free time.
You have no idea the mistake you're making.
Suddenly, a giant burst of light and wind takes over the alley, blinding everyone as Jen, the pink Time Force Ranger, emerges. She's sparking with chronal energy, rapid-firing her vector weapon at Draken.
Who are? No time! Start firing!
The two Pink Rangers unload on Draken, who's starting to weaken.
With animation, the sky's the limit. Now the next consideration in turning Power Rangers animated is, how is that gonna happen? What's it gonna look like? And before you say two-dimensional, haha, you gotta consider that 3D animation is also on the table. A 3D production would be very cost-effective. However, the startup costs and effort are pretty steep, needing to model and rig each character and asset. Look back at Jimmy Neutron. The only reason the show had as many assets as it did was because they started off with a theatrical film and simply reused everything they made for the show. I mentioned Into and Across the Spider-Verse earlier, but one 3D work that I think would be good to look at is Star Wars The Clone Wars. It's an animated companion to the Star Wars prequels, which are also live action. It also has great action while keeping the spirit of the films. As long as they make good-looking models, it'll be fine. Unless they do what Marvel's doing for What If. For 2D animation, there's two types to consider. First is frame by frame, where, as the name implies, each frame is drawn to a character sheet. More labor intensive, but features the most flexibility and expression. The other is rigged animation. It's similar to 3D animation in that you make a rig in a program like Toon Boom. Once you have your assets made, they're good to be reused. One good example of frame by frame would be Avatar: The Last Airbender with its gorgeous visuals, expressive characters, and amazing fights. I mean, look at the Zuko and Azula Agni Kai scene, still one of the best in animation. On the other hand, rigged animation can struggle with doing as dynamic fight scenes as frame by frame, though it's not impossible with the right style or boarding. So while arguably cheaper to produce, which has been Power Rangers' MO for a while, it falls flat in the one aspect the show is known for. But one example is Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which has a combination of rigged and frame-by-frame animation. While it may sound like an obvious choice to stick with frame-by-frame, the animation style does play into the development of a show. I can guarantee rigged will likely be part of the discussion, for various reasons not limited to being economical, for better or for worse. Not really an example, but I do want to plug an indie rigged animation project. Check out Catching Up, a pilot by fellow YouTuber and gaming whiz LS Mark. It hit its Kickstarter goal, and I'll say, it's well earned. It's a great showcase of a rigged style with absolutely gorgeous compositing and lighting. I'll put a link in the description. I do want to point out one more type of 2D animation because it's stylistically different. Anime. Power Rangers does have a Japanese pedigree thanks to Toei, who themselves have produced some of the most well-known anime like Dragon Ball, Sailor Moon, and Digimon.
I'm going to a birthday party. I got my friend a pink Power Ranger. My brother and I had a give-and-take relationship. I would give and he would take.
Lately, anime made for Western audiences has been taking off. Speaking of taking off, Scott Pilgrim takes off. This show released about a year ago, and it's got a lot of really great moments, capturing a lot of what made the film a cult classic. Again, it's an adaptation of a live-action film, which itself was an adaptation of a graphic novel. It allowed us to return to a world where the actors would have been too old had it been live action. Of course, you could also just look at regular old anime from Japan. That's pretty good too. Obviously, mech anime like Gurren Lagann, Evangelion, there's a lot you could take from anime. And beyond that, there are things like stop motion or combinations of those different styles like mixed media. For the sake of simplicity, I'm leaving that out. I think all of these are valid styles for the show, but since we need to move on, I'm going to pick frame by frame as the style of show that we're hypothetically doing. There's this term in the animation industry of board-driven shows. This is basically where the storyboards are the basis for how the show flows versus how most media focuses on the script. Being that animation is such a visual medium, it's a great way to help make that aspect of it a driving force. I'm normally all for it, but in my opinion, I think Power Rangers thrives in a more plot-driven direction, but I think heavy use of storyboarding will still be extremely important for action scenes and general cinematography. If you've seen the videos on my channel, you know how much I've pushed that Power Rangers needs better writing. I mean, it used to, and it's proven itself capable of telling amazing stories. Because of that, I don't think a fully board-driven show would be appropriate. And that's why I'm proposing a mix, partially board-driven and partially script-driven. Next up is picking a good art style, and this is separate from animation style, doing character designs and figuring out the overall visual identity of the show, whether it's 3D, 2D, or what have you. Luckily for us, someone's already done a fantastic concept of what that could look like. DOMESTEPHANE is an animator who's been doing some amazing fan works. On his channel, you'll find fan animations that look out of this world. He's done Mighty Morphin, Zeo, In Space, and some Power Rangers adjacent shows like VR Troopers and Big Bad Beetleborgs, all in different styles, which makes it a really good example for us to take a look at. In terms of art style, in general, he's got a very bold look going through all of them with bright, highly saturated colors. But individually, he's made aesthetic changes that subtly give each of them their own unique vibe. Look at his character designs. designs. His Mighty Morphin Red Ranger having a different body type helps to differentiate him from the other members of his team. That's just basic but good character design philosophy to follow. Having differing and recognizable silhouettes. This is even more pronounced in their unmorphed designs thanks to the different shapes from their hairstyles alone. Just don't go too overboard or you'll end up with tall, lunk-alert Knuckles from Sonic Boom. The Zeo style is more muscular, more stylistically comic book. Then, for In Space, they aren't as muscular as Zeo, but are for sure less whimsical looking than Mighty Morphin. While not Power Rangers, his Big Bad Beetleborgs animation can show you what a morph could look like, and it's probably my personal favorite in terms of art style. The shading, the lines, and exaggerating of proportions and camera angles look so good. Also, Dominic just gets what makes Power Rangers look like Power Rangers. He's put in more character in his designs than that of the 2017 movie. Sure, he didn't drastically change the suit design, but he retains the strong sense of theming inherited by Power Rangers from Super Sentai and all the design principles that came with it. Now, suit design philosophy is its own beast to tackle, but for an animated work, it's imperative that we preserve that aspect like Dominic does. I hate to have to compare artists' work because they're both amazing in my opinion. I think Dominic's is more quintessential Power Rangers, especially when put next to Brandon Ragnar's concept drawing from earlier. No hate to the artist, but this doesn't look like Power Rangers. It looks more like a non-fan's general interpretation of Power Rangers, missing the nuances that make the design click. Dominic, however, is definitely on the right track for how the show should look. And luckily for me, I got the chance to interview him and he was able to provide me some insight into his animation, which helped me so much for this section of the video. Go follow him on Instagram. And with the show's art direction out of the way, it's really just formatting. And by format, I mean whether it should be a half-hour show or not. Many animated shows do 2 11-minute episodes. SpongeBob is famous, for example.
He took off his pants.
I'll give him a week.
I'll give him 11 minutes.
I think with the right storytelling, Power Rangers should be fine as a half-hour show. Now, the downside is that animation is expensive. It's gonna sound like a huge downgrade compared to what we've gotten in the past, but I think the show would fit a 10-episode format really well. And I'm aware that Cosmic Fury did get 10 episodes to mix fan reaction, but I think it has some good focus and lack of filler. It's definitely one of its strengths, as few and far between as they were. And because every second of animation has a cost, I'd rather not spread ourselves too thin over 20-30 episodes, a quality shorter season than a poor quality long one. If it does well, the show can be greenlit for more seasons. I've always advocated that the episode count shouldn't matter if the story told is succinct and high quality. Plus, lower episode counts equal more budget put towards the show that could be put towards animation, giving us amazing fights, or it could be used to bring in guest actors from Power Rangers' long history. Now it's finally time for the big pitch, and here I am, walking into Cartoon Network. Oh, too soon? I mean Nickelodeon Studios, which I've actually walked by. It's really easy to casually pass it in Burbank. And no, it's not where Dan Schneider did his feet stuff. That's Nick on Sunset in Hollywood. Hello, TV network executives. Let me introduce you to my hypothetical pitch that I reserve the right to use in the event that I get the opportunity to pitch a show to you in real life. I give you Power Rangers. Animated. Sure, let's go with that. The series is a take on Power Rangers that explores its long history and wide world. It'll feature a new guest character every episode, a past Ranger to learn from, a la Batman, Brave and the Bold. Our protagonists are actually 3 Rangers from previous seasons: Mystic Force Pink Ranger Vita, SPD Green Ranger Bridge, and Wild Force Blue Ranger Max. 3 Rangers, each with contrasting personalities, find themselves working together after the mysterious disappearances of their respective teams. A typical episode would feature them following a lead learned in a previous story. In one planned episode, while searching for clues, they run into Eric Myers, the Quantum Ranger. I was too lazy to draw another Ranger, so I'm just using his picture from the show. That's good enough. Max, remembering him from a past team-up, asks him if he recalls anything. Eric tells him no, saying he has no idea who the Wild Force Rangers are or the threat of the Orgs. Vita is uninterested, thinking the answer they seek lies elsewhere. She pushes for Max to move on so they can travel to the next town and consult with a different Ranger. Vita and Max butt heads. Eric breaks them apart, saying they're going nowhere fighting each other. He points to his morpher and tells them they have a lot in common, and that they're both Power Rangers. This is actually a parallel of Wes and Eric's interaction during the Time Force finale.
We may have grown up differently, but we have a lot in common. Look at this. We are Power Rangers, Eric.
Meanwhile, Bridge is upside down, doing a handstand, initiating his thinking pose. He has an idea, asking Eric if he can contact his team, the rest of the Time Force Rangers. 4 of them reside in the far-off future, the year 3000. Bridge himself is also from the future, just not from the year 3000. He's from the relatively not-so-far-off year of 2025. Yeah, we'll have to iron out the kinks with that one. A monster fight happens. It's your typical Power Rangers action scene. The three morph. Eric also joins them. After defeating the monster, Eric looks at Max's suit. It looks familiar. Eric agrees to Bridges' request to contact his team, so he attempts to do so. But when he does, he finds his comms restricted. Time Force is purposefully cutting Eric's feed to the future. A voice can be heard. 2025. Static. Nexus. Static. Fracture. Even more static. Terraventure. The signal drops. The three Rangers are filled with more questions than answers, but they received their next clue. Terraventure, the now destroyed previous home of the Lost Galaxy Rangers, but how are they going to get there? And that's the pitch. It's kind of rough and totally not how I do one. I'd be a little more expository, because I doubt network executives are going to get some of the references I mentioned. And I know it's a hypothetical pitch to hypothetical executives, but I am also pitching it to you, the Ranger fans watching my videos, and you kind of have to tailor it to whoever is listening. But what I tried to do was establish how the average episode would go, what the Rangers' goal is. I also tried to do something that we hadn't necessarily seen on the show. First off is the unique roster. 3 Rangers is something we've had before, but pink, blue, and green is a new combination. I think the lack of red would certainly be an uphill battle with it being so popular of a color, especially in terms of merch sales. I'm acknowledging that risk. This was done purely for story purposes, with none of them being the leader. Of course, the executives will go back and forth, we just have to be open with a little give and take. The second thing I intended to do with the show that may not have been obvious from the pitch is a road trip concept. Something Power Rangers can't really do in live action without having to rebuild sets, never mind the fact that it was filmed on 2 different continents. And I'm aware this is far from a perfect animated Power Rangers pitch, or animated anything pitch. I've never pitched a show to network executives. I'm aware it probably sounds like fan fiction, but the crux of the hypothetical pitch is that I'm trying to accomplish something Power Rangers hasn't done before by exploring new dynamics and concepts. That's the strength of animation. A show like that could come as close to traditional Power Rangers or as far away from it as possible, but right now we're in a drought of Power Rangers media on the screen. I think if we tried animation, I'd like us to attempt something different. Let the imagination take it as far as it can without long established ways of production holding it back. Now I do want to say animators are without jobs at the moment. Even veterans like Maxwell Adams, who worked on the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, is selling memorabilia from the show just to get by. There's plenty of videos covering the state of the industry, so I'd check out those if you can. Of course, support other creative endeavors like Ellis Mark's Catching Up and DOMESTEPHANE's work. But know that animation really is a labor of love and creativity. I wouldn't be considering Power Rangers and animation together for a video if I didn't believe in the passion and hard work of the many artists and staff in the industry. Would you be interested in an animated Power Rangers show? Let me know in the comments, or you can mention your favorite animated show and how Power Rangers could take cues from it.